Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. It's Hail Varsity Weekend Edition. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. Hey, just for the record, we were up and ready to go at 7 a.m.
And kind of. I mean,
let's just say
some of us were.
We've had to move locations because clearly sitting at the same table together this morning was going to cause all sorts of technical hell. The other piece of advice from last night is if you think you are man enough or woman enough to take on an 18-ounce Kansas City, New York strip, think again. Kraynak, I was out by 9:45, and I feel like someone needs to take a billy club to my midsection so I can feel better. I'm hurting today for the wrong reason. I fought the meat sweats and lost last night, fellas.
Yeah, it was rough. I think it was the peppercorn on top. So you could do the optional peppercorn, and that adds, I don't know, just about 8 pounds of gas internally to your body. I think I know, but when we walked out of there, we were both. I mean, it was bad. It was like you just felt puffy. You were just filled with air, and I was just like, I just want to let out. I just want to let out the deepest burp I've ever let out, and I couldn't. And so I took Tums, and then I was fine. I rallied. I was able to still meet our compadres while you.
Was there a pun intended there? You're able to still meet your compadres? Huh?
Well played.
Meet. There you go. I see what you're doing there.
That was weak. I'm sorry.
Already at 7:56 a.m.
So we are here. We are absolutely thankful you're here for the weekend edition. Brandon Vogel, Counter Reed coming up in a little bit. The Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Guys, a lot to keeping with the meat theme digest with Nebraska-Minnesota. It's been a couple of days now. The rest of the college football world gets after it. Some excitement when we think about Big Noon today, because Nebraska's next opponent, Colorado, is, it's Coach Prime's debut at TCU. What do the Buffs look like? What's Nebraska in for a week from today when we're in Boulder at the Blur parties getting set up? A lot to think about with Nebraska and their task, and that is, where can Nebraska be in 1 week? Let me ask you this. Do you guys, and it kind of spurred some thoughts, I was watching PJ Fleck's post game, and he was ultra complimentary about what Nebraska was, how just difficult their defense was to preparing for those ghosts. As much Syracuse film as they had watched, it didn't matter because you didn't have similar personnel, and it's been a talking point about how Nebraska's 3-3-5 defense is different than what a lot of 3-3-5 defenses are, just because of the size you have up the middle with Polar Bear and Robinson. That was something that they had no way to combat. That's why the running game was stuck in the mud for Minnesota, and it was a credit to Nebraska. I'm interested to see just where the defense can make a jump, but offensively, Nebraska's got to hone in on what they can do well, how they can get better with the running back run game, and of course, from a decision-making standpoint, you don't want to kind of paralyze free flow and play with a super athletic and talented quarterback in Sims, but you can't also be forcing it in. I mean, those are all some things that got to get better from week 1 to week 2. And Fleck was like, I don't believe you make your biggest jump week 1 to week 2. You keep building as the season goes on. Guys, that's the thing that Coach Rules talked about a lot, with this season being a bit of a marathon, but yet you'll want to be able to sprint to the finish.
And Schmidt, I want to go back to the point you made about Nebraska's defensive line real quick, because really the Nebraska defense was one of the main points that I came away from that game feeling positive about. And as you go talk to Husker fans around and other people in the media as well, it's a common theme, man. The defense really did play well. But I do want to put one thing in context here, and that's that we did mention leading into that show on Thursday, leading into the game, our pregame show, that as Minnesota's fall camp wore on, I think the offensive line was one of the areas where they felt weakest, and that comes from what was reports that were coming out of fall camp. You heard it in some Minnesota podcasts as they were kind of previewing the game, and then you kind of heard it from PJ Fleck himself as he talked about the fact that they didn't have a solid offensive line. They had 7 or 8 guys they felt good about, and they wanted to see those guys in game action first, and that's one of the reasons why Minnesota decided to go chuck it around 44 times in the game on Thursday night. And one thing that is nice is I don't think the offensive line is going to be the strong point of Colorado, of Northern Illinois, of Louisiana Tech, but the other Big Ten giants are looming, and I'm not sitting here saying that the defense is a perfect product. I mean, some people I think really feel good about where the defense is at. I am one of those people, but this defense, it's not just the offense that's going to have to show progress over the next couple of weeks, because I don't think that the physical lines of scrimmage that we're used to from Minnesota over the past couple of years are necessarily what we saw on Thursday night. I do think that defense is going to have to continue to build as the season goes on too. And I know obviously we're going to talk about what the offense needs to improve upon, but I just wanted to lay out how I feel about the defense, and that's that defense needs to show some improvement too. They looked really good. It's a good starting point, but I'm not fully convinced that whenever the likes of Michigan and Iowa and other teams like to really run downhill in the Big Ten, once you play them, I'm not convinced that defensive line and that defense as a whole is ready to go for that just yet. They're going to have to continue showing progress, but I do like what I saw from them on Thursday night.
What are they going to do against the better lines, right? Yeah. That's the question. And Brandon Vogel with us from Counter Read at Brandon L. Vogel. Kraynak, jump in there. Sorry, I had to reset.
No, you're fine. I was just saying, and even though it's a 3-3-5 and that's much ballyhooed, technically they started 4 defensive linemen. That's what they started with against Minnesota. So it's for those that were wondering, would that alignment work out? Like, it's not enough beef. Well, they can switch it up if they want to, right? And they can start 4. So they did do that against Minnesota, which seemed to be somewhat effective. But point well taken, Elijah, that it's like, there's probably not a bunch of Outland winners on that Minnesota line right now. So let's see. Let's see what happens.
Not yet.
As Brandon Vogel slides in, and I don't know, there's something. Is there something different about your backdrop, or is it the fact that you have a black hat on today? Something is just
black. It's the black hat.
It's the black.
Yeah,
hat.
it might be the black.
Okay.
Happy Deion Sanders Day, everyone.
Oh yeah, happy Deion Sanders Day to you as well.
It was funny because as Schmidt was laying out that it was Coach Prime's first game, Deion Sanders, there was Coach Prime highlights that came on the TV behind him. You could see like Coach Prime playing, like it was baseball, and then it was him with the Falcons, and it was him with the Cowboys, just making plays. And I'm like, the timing on that was just too perfect.
Listen,
how many teams did Deion rock? Cincinnati, San Francisco, Atlanta, New York. Where else am I? Major League Baseball. I think those are the 4, right?
I think so.
And then with the NFL, we're talking Atlanta, San Fran, Dallas,
and
then Washington. He ended his career with the mother of all Washington.
Was he with Baltimore? Wasn't he with Baltimore too?
I don't know. I don't think so. We will Wikipedia in 2 seconds. But Deion had the mother of all pinstripe suits on when he signed his deal with Washington. It was the maroon and gold, the glowing maroon suit with the yellow pinstripes. And I think he had the brightest yellow tie I've seen in my life.
PJ Fleck has some suits like that.
He does. And he has bright yellow ties. Vogue's just awesome write-up partner on Counter Read with Nebraska, and your thoughts on the Nebraska-Minnesota game. And, it's just different where a lot of us either picked a tight Minnesota win or just as you looked in the mirror and made your prediction, weren't sure. A lot of Nebraska fans not sure that Nebraska was ready for Minnesota game 1, meaning it's too much to ask game 1 on the road in Minneapolis. And then you watch the game and you come away irate that Nebraska lost because it was there for the taking. So the score going into this, and the end of it doesn't match what the 4 quarters looked like, because it was there for Nebraska to get out of town with a win. And that's something that's been a wrestling match here the last 3 days for Nebraska fans. What could have happened versus what happened, and then the optics of it being kind of what you thought maybe going in.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the game kind of it answered some questions for the positive, I think, and answered some for the negative. If you went into that game, or I went into that game thinking, okay, going to be pretty slow and sloggy and ugly, for lack of a better term, and Minnesota's like, it's been playing that for 7 years now under PJ Fleck. Nebraska hasn't been. Could they be in for that kind of game? Yeah, they were. That said, it comes down. Well, you can't turn the ball over 4 times. That's what it is. And you trust a Minnesota to make those plays more than you trust in Nebraska based on their track record. So it unfolded very much to type, I think, based on what this game looked like going in. It was unfortunate. We had to reset our workplace counter to 285 days since we last had to say, yeah, it was a loss. But if you look at the numbers, actually, which I'm very much tired of saying that as someone who says it pretty often, but it's what it was.
But if you look at the numbers, oh man, Brandon Vogel is with us. And all right, so we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Nebraska's now spent, 2 decades trying to furnish an offense that will appeal to NFL quarterbacks, NFL receivers, right? Optimize, because those kids don't want to play in some option running offense, right? They're not coming. And then we added it up. And in the past 20 years, Nebraska has sent exactly 2 human beings at those positions
3
to the NFL. What do you mean 3?
Trey Palmer. You keep forgetting Trey Palmer.
Yeah, Trey Palmer doesn't count yet. He hasn't even played.
He does.
He made the roster. He made the active roster.
Pick that made the roster.
Thank you.
That absolutely counts.
Okay, but anyways, you've sent
Stanley Morgan 4. We're up to 4.
Okay, fine. Okay, you got 4. 4. Okay, so every 5 years, you get one of those guys.
Brandon Riley.
He didn't. No, he didn't. He had some preseason goodness, and then it just never.
Mornay Pearson-El, Alonzo Moore.
Oh no, there's also what's his name? That's Samori Toure. He's made a roster too.
You can get a half point. You can get a half point for Wan'Dale Robinson, right?
Yeah.
That's tough. That's tough.
Okay, let's narrow it down to quarterbacks.
To your point.
Let's narrow it down to quarterbacks.
It's not a factory like LSU.
Can y'all stop fact checking me this morning? This is a bunch of crap. This is not what I joined here for. Not what I woke up early for. Okay, let's narrow it to quarterback though. Nebraska's had more quarterbacks in its history convert to safety in the NFL than have actually played the position of quarterback in the NFL. Just saying it's not happening, right? And then you look at what Jeff Sims is. Look at what Heinrich Harburg is. Look at probably what Chubba Purdy is. There ain't a Tom Brady on this roster right now. And you've heard a lot of people say, oh, you can't have Sims run the ball that much. I'm like, why the hell not? He's good at it, right? He's not good at throwing really well. Yeah, the line isn't very good at pass protection. Don't have a big fleet group of receivers. Why the hell not? Why would Nebraska not be a total ground-based quarterback and tailback running offense? What say you, Brandon?
I thought Rule was pretty good on that. Well, I know he said over the summer, I think he said it to you, Schmidt, at Big Ten Media Days, like, look, they don't want to run a bunch of QB power and like those things that are like, yes, 100% this play, Jeff Sims, you are running it. I think where you get the wiggle room here is like limiting those pieces of it. But as Rule said post game, they had a bunch of read plays where Jeff Sims and based on his numbers was making the right read. decided to take it. And he really gets dangerous when you can pull it down in scramble situations. Nebraska's passing game wasn't strong enough, I think, there wasn't a lot of impetus to throw the ball more than Nebraska did, unfortunately. And that's probably the biggest thing offensively going forward is just that receiver group. And obviously the 4 interceptions. It looked a lot. I guess my concern offensively is I think they would like to run Jeff Sims a few less times. Sure. Can you get a run game outside of him going better than they were able to? And now Minnesota is a good defensive team, was replacing a good chunk, but that's a well-established kind of identity there for them. So that's the piece of it. I mean, it looked a lot, I think, to your point, Mark, coming out of that of like, oh boy, this is kind of what it's going to be. Like their best chance to win games is going to be running Jeff Sims more than anybody probably thought.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here. And real fast, Mark, just to jump ahead, I want to get...
It better be real fast because, oh, man, I got a point.
Go for it then.
Just kidding.
Go for
I'm
it.
kidding. I'm totally
please.
Wow.
No.
Please. I turn the floor over to you, Mark.
No.
Tyrant.
No, I was just going to say, and the point is winning, right? Like, the point is to actually win. So if that gets you your best chance, and then here's the refrain, well, he won't be able to survive the season taking all those hits running. And it's like, okay, so you're saving him for what? For more interceptions? Like, we got to keep him healthy so that he can throw picks into traffic. Like, no, you don't have to keep him healthy for that. Like, you run him because that's your best chance to win. And if he gets hurt, then Harburg comes in, who also can't throw. Or I mean, allegedly, that's what we've heard, right? And then we've seen Purdy. I didn't see Joe Montana there. I mean, anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Elijah.
Well, we just got more comments in as we did yesterday. Let's pull it up here. Jamal Lord 2.0.
It's not Jamal Lord.
It's the common thing we're hearing over the past couple of days. And Schmidt and I...
It's that feel. It's that feel of, okay, there's way more explosive, positive opportunity with him running the football than having something good happen when it comes to throwing the football. It's got to be play action. It's got to be wide open. It's got to be based off of some sort of run threat where the passing game can thrive and survive. Okay. That's something that you're probably looking at real hard this week. If you're Nebraska going forward, you're going to have to score a hell of a lot more points than 10. You're not always going to face defenses that are on the level of Minnesota or what Minnesota can be, especially their secondary. But Nebraska has work to do, and they have, to Rule's point, lots of season left to get it done. We're going to coach him up, right? Does that burns in my mind where he's not happy with the result. He expects more from his quarterback that's played a lot of football, and it could get better. I think there's a lot of Nebraska fans, and I'm still in that camp as well, where, all right, you don't want to make your final ruling yet because it is just one game, but man, it's got to get a lot better, Vogues, and it's got to get better quickly because, for whatever Colorado is and isn't, that the back end is going to be pretty high level talent and well coached because of Prime, and then it as bad as their offensive line might be or as thin as it might be against what Nebraska looks to be pretty good up front, it takes one little bubble screen and a missed tackle for one of their little dudes in the skill spot offensively to hit a big play. We'll know more later, but next Saturday is so do or die for the rest of the season when we talk about postseason and getting to 6.
Yeah, I mean, to the, like you guys seen a lot of Jamal Lord comparisons. I will note, Nebraska has been on the field for 63 plays so far. But also, if we follow the Jamal Lord track, and you think about this season really honestly and objectively, would you take 7-7? Would you take 2002 yes. Jamal Lord right. to get him to 7-7? I think I probably would. Look ahead a little bit to Colorado. They're going to be really good at quarterback. I think you can put that one in ink. I'm really not just based on Dion, but based on the guys that they have. So yeah, I mean, I'm real interested to get a look at what the Buffs look like today. But I think the game plan for Nebraska, unless something major changes in a couple of hours when they take the field, Colorado, it's going to be pretty smash mouth is how Nebraska wins that game offensively. Can they do that? A lot of people have questions about Colorado up front. We'll get a look at that too here in a little bit. But in many ways, I think the Minnesota game, even though it was a loss, should prepare Nebraska pretty well for next Saturday based on what we expect to see from Colorado.
And Brandon Vogel is with us. And now, in terms of playing more smash mouth, it seems like just when you boil it down and you simplify it, I think you had something like 5 running back runs in the first half. I think Gabe Irvin had 2, and Grant had 3. Maybe Ramir had 1. It was something like that. It was a really low number. It's kind of that, right? Like, just feed it a little bit more to the backs. Maybe take a little bit off of Sims, but rely on that as your offense. Like, that's it. And to do that, we tried to get into this yesterday too, and then Chris started talking about feet, and it got ridiculous. But
I did not. You were the one that led into restraints.
Part of it as an offensive coordinator is showing restraint. So even though your down and distance sheet tells you, hey, time to throw it, based on this situation, hold yourself back a little bit, keep it on the ground. Like, don't throw unless you absolutely effing have to. I mean, do you think that's what Nebraska should adopt based on what we've seen, small sample size so far?
Yeah, I think they probably want to get there. Part of the challenge of playing Minnesota is they're really good with just their ability to control the clock of putting teams on their back foot right away. And so, they come out there that first drive and chew a lot of clock and flip the field as much as you can flip it. Nebraska starts from the 1-yard line. And their response to that was really good. Like, even just getting out of there, I thought was encouraging. And then Minnesota went on another long drive. And, Nebraska hardly had the ball in that first half. And then for that to end the way that it ended right before halftime with the turnover inside 5, some pretty tough blows that Nebraska sustained, but at that point they're only down 3-0. So I think against a Colorado or against anybody going forward, I'd be interested to see what things would have looked like if it had been exactly flipped. If Nebraska had taken the ball first and came out and it doesn't score, but puts together a solid drive, burns some clock, and punts it down to the 1. That's, I think, going to be the difference. And, we've got 11 games to go, but I think what most of us probably assumed coming in, based on Nebraska's talent, how they want to play, or how they said they want to play, we've seen one game now, like, it's just going to be a knife's edge, like, most of the season. I know people are drastically tired of this. I'm very tired of, like, pulling these numbers, but it's just how I look at it. And it's like, you lost by 3 and you were -3 in turnovers. Like, that's what it is, unfortunately. So I think once we move past that piece of it, like, there will be a lot that's actually encouraging from that opening game.
And Brendan, I think one of the things that has left people a little bit discouraged, in addition to the turnovers from the offense, is just that some of the things we saw in game 1 flew in the face of what we heard the coaches say throughout summer and throughout fall camp. Whenever they talk about, well, how much of an advantage the tight end position is going to be, they felt good about that. But then you only have 1 catch from Nate Borkacher in the tight end position. It's that one-handed catch down by the goal, and I think was about 2 yards. And I guess if you count the Heinrich Harburg catch as a tight end catch, you can throw that in there as well. But Heinrich Harburg is your third leading receiver. That's a surprise to people. Billy Kemp, only 1 target in the game on Thursday night. It's an interception. They never go back to Kemp, a guy that is expected to be one of the leaders in your wide receiver room. And then you have Anthony Grant, who was said a week and a half ago was a fumbling issue, and then you see him in crunch time moments fumbling the football. People weren't expecting to see that. There's just a lot that flew in the face of what the coaching staff had to say through fall camp, and I want to get your take on what was most surprising to you from what we saw from Coach Satterfield's offense on Thursday night.
Probably Grant's role in that game, and which ties a little bit to what ended up being Gabe Irvin's minimal role in that game. I mean, there was a point early in the second half where I texted a friend of mine and said, and Nebraska had the lead at this point, and I'm like, it's curious that the guy the head coach just said a week ago is the third string because he's got a fumbling problem. It seems to be their primary rusher right now. And it was fine for another, 10, 12 minutes of game clock. And then the fumble came. And, it's not, Nebraska didn't lose the game solely because of that, not putting it all on one guy. But that was probably the most dissonant piece of it, where I was like, wait a second, weren't we just a week ago talking about a potential issue here? And I thought Rule did a good job kind of explaining that piece of it post game too. It's just, it's the first game for a new coaching staff as well, and even one that I do think is well prepared and very organized. Like, yeah, it's a season opener, so every game kind of has its own story, and you try to prepare the best you can. But once you get in there, you get past those first two drives, it's really about reaction and the decisions that you make real time.
Some pluses to take away from Nebraska, for as much as, there's a lot to not like about what you saw offensively and the results, of course. I saw noticeable improvement special teams wise. You had a big return. I think Nebraska probably equaled their punt return yards in one game that they had all season, and that was like 8 yards. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but they tried to return it a couple times. And then just punting also. I mean, you're 47-plus yards per punt, and pin Minnesota inside the 23 times. Good stuff from that standpoint in terms of just like an overall unit. Was that your kind of takeaway too, Brandon, that overall the team seemed like it did make some improvements, just obviously had those snafus offensively?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you wanted to boxing card this thing, like special teams win for Nebraska, I think defensively win for Nebraska, though if you wanted to call it a draw just based on forcing four turnovers for Minnesota, you could talk me into that. And then offensively, I would give that one to Minnesota. Not just special teams. I thought both sides of the ball, but I particularly noticed it defensively. Nebraska looked really physical, and Minnesota did too. It was just a physical game, but we haven't seen that all the time in the past for Nebraska. So those were encouraging signs. I heard Chris talking about it a little bit before I came on. PJ Fleck's comments post game I thought were pretty interesting too. And here's one for the Jamal Lord fans out there. He compared this 3-3-5 to preparing for the triple option back when he had to do it at Syracuse. Specifically mentioned, he's like, I'm glad we had 4 weeks to do that before playing Syracuse in the Pinstripe Bowl. Here, they of course had an entire offseason to try and not prepare because there was no film of this defense, but you think about it conceptually. So it's interesting, and that's an advantage that'll wane a little bit as Nebraska goes on. You'll at least see how they choose to do things, but the kind of core benefit I think of this defensive approach, which is but you can see what we've done in the past, but it still doesn't change on a play-to-play basis. Like, we can get really, really creative and confusing. So that was encouraging too, to hear the opposing coach talk about it that way.
Brandon Vogel with this weekend edition, Hail Varsity at Brandon L. Vogel. Find him on Twitter. Read him with Counter. Read him and Aaron Sorensen do an awesome job. So I'm anxious, Vogues, as we try and project Saturday in Boulder. It's going to be another early season kind of a gut check. That's a good thing you can take away from Minnesota, where mean, it went down to the wire, and I think it's okay to say, look, you found a way to lose, right? Minnesota made some plays. As good as the defense was, there was at least one more stop you needed, and they're going to take that with them and probably use that as fuel for this week against Colorado. Offensively, I think that's all of our question marks. Okay, can the O-line get better for more of a running back run game? Can you give yourself more of a look at a guy like Irvin that can hammer away and get you those benchmark 75 yards in the fourth quarter? Are you going to go back to being a fourth quarter team running the football versus dancing with the passing game a little bit? And then finally, let's get into Sims just for one last second, not to beat a dead horse, but I think let's look at the upside to Sims's ability. Let's go there for a moment as to, okay, say he gets coached up. What's the best version of Jeff Sims Nebraska can see Saturday and beyond? Let's say Nebraska develops a quarterback that's got a ton of talent, and they get better as the season goes on. What's a ceiling for Sims? We all went into this, I did anyway, with some expectations based on health and skill sets that, okay, the guy can run about 12 times a game. I think the pitch count's probably 15 to 20 pass attempts. And clearly the decision-making is going to be drilled on in that quarterback room film session-wise. But is Sims a guy Nebraska can win with moving forward?
I think so. If some of those other pieces come along, like you look at, which the other piece in particular being, I think, the run game first and foremost. You look back at the Minnesota game, like the one that you absolutely can't have is the interception in the end zone. Right. The other two, like
may happen.
And I'm forgetting the other who had the other interception. Good players, a couple of Minnesota's best players, and guys who have been that for a while. So still, you want to avoid those. I was looking at one kind of advanced stats breakdown, which expected turnovers in this game, which is based on how many times the ball's fumbled, no matter who recovers it, and pass breakups and that sort of thing. It was actually even. It was about one each. So for it to be 4-1 means that Minnesota basically intercepted almost every ball that it got its hands on, which doesn't usually happen. You usually get about 20% of those. So things like that, I think just being a little bit smarter, also having a game under your belt for Sims. So can they win with him? I think they can. I think if he's let's see, 1 to 3 now, touchdown to interception. Like a great season for Sims would probably, knowing that's where we have to go from, would probably be like 15 to 10, which 10's still a lot of interceptions. But I think if you could get that, that probably means Nebraska's in the 6-6 range.
Got a lot of comments coming in where, folks are looking, of course, ahead to Colorado. And as we watch them today, are you looking for just whether they can hold up on the lines? Is that essentially it? I that's what I'm trying to project forward is, are they going to have Shedeur running all over the place because they can't protect?
He's being chased.
And are they going to be able to stop? Like when you want to run it at them, are they going to be able to stop that? It kind of comes down to that, doesn't it, for you?
Yeah, I think so. Particularly as when you look at it through a Nebraska lens of like, oh, what's Nebraska going to try to do against them? Defensively, I'll be real interested to see what Colorado's able to do. I do think both lines for the Buffs are kind of the headliner here. I'm really interested to see Shedeur Sanders. Good player, at Jackson State. He was a guy who had some FBS offers. Let's see what he can do against a Big 12 team now. There's that piece of it, and then the other one. I think the one that from a Nebraska perspective could make you the most nervous going into is, let's see what the offense looks like broadly. Sean Lewis, really good offensive coordinator. when he gets that offense up and running, they can put up a ton of points. Former Kent State head coach left the head coaching job to be Deion's offensive coordinator, which is interesting in its own right. But if you didn't watch a ton of Kent State in the MAC, they were putting up a ton of points. But they also were a team that kind of bizarrely moved the ball pretty well against Georgia last year in a game that everybody assumed was just going to be 56 to nothing. So that's that one. That's worth keeping an eye on. They've got a good guy on the headset on offense.
Bogues, what did you think of Nebraska's portal additions? And this kind of touches on Moonbot's comment. You know, the carries, the touches, the snaps. When we look at Elijah Judy's a guy that we didn't hear a ton about in camp post spring, right? You've got MJ Sherman, Chief Borders, Billy Camp, of course. You have Sims. What did you think of the portal additions for game one for Nebraska, lumping their performances or lack thereof?
I thought they were pretty easy to miss because I didn't think about them as kind of a group at all, which, you know, I think is kind of what the question is getting at. You know, it's how that can go often. Like, and Nebraska, I would say, outside of Sims and Thompson last year, and then the past 2 years prior to that, two really good pickups at wide receiver. You know, none of Nebraska's transfer portal additions, and it's possible I'm forgetting somebody but none of them have been just like, oh, slam dunk, like somehow they just pulled the best player from, you know, insert school here. Although Samori Turi may have been that, but that's coming from FCS. So that's the piece of it. Like, yeah, it's good when guys are, you know, I've said this before, you know, former 4-star, 5-star high school recruits. It's great that they went to, you know, a power program. If they didn't play a lot, sure, maybe a reset is what they need, but I think that too often becomes the through line there of like, you take this guy from Alabama and who could crack the depth chart there? You could be a second-round draft pick and never play. Well, the reality is often a little bit different. And again, you know, 63 plays. Well, defense had more, so call it 70-ish plays is all they had. And so we'll see. And I think some of this too comes in with being a year one scenario for Matt Rule. Like, he's really serious. And I don't know if this played into how much any of those guys played or not, but he's really into, like, I'm going to play the guys who do the right thing all the time. And we've seen, even with some guys who are expected contributors, Marcus Washington being the case here, wasn't available for that first half. Like, if you're not going to do that, like, Matt Rule is not gonna bend that to just to win a game. And there's no reason to in a year one scenario. Like, you are really trying to lay the foundation for what's going to come down the road.
Defensively, Nebraska did play 24 guys on the participation chart. Unofficially, that was the count, was 24. And there was a little Elijah Judy. MJ Sherman was in a few key moments. Didn't make necessarily any splash plays, though, to your point. Didn't necessarily notice some of those guys. What about in particular, though, the lack of touches for, I think what we all perceived is maybe the two top offensive threats on the edges, Thomas Fedoni, Billy Kemp. Combined, a catch, if that?
None.
One.
Yeah. One for Kemp for a couple yards. Is that something Nebraska needs to address? It seems like it is.
Yeah, I mean, the Fedoni one I could see a little bit more. You know, he's been in the program for a long time, but wasn't able to play, unfortunately. He's been in a game. He's been on the sidelines. He's traveled. Like, he's used to all that stuff. But really, it was, you know, pretty similar to a freshman debut for him. So that one you can kind of kind of chalk up potentially to that. The Kemp one is a bit more confusing to me, specifically because, they targeted him, I think, just maybe once or twice. But it's as a slot guy, like he's a player like you could run, something specifically for, of like, we just got to get him the ball. And to not have that stands out a little bit, but this game still is just weird, and like how little actual football there was in it, just with the way the two teams play.
Yeah.
Vogues, your day looks like what? How much college football are you going to consume?
as much as possible, which means as much as the young ones will allow for. But definitely going to make a point to pay close attention to this Colorado TCU matchup, and then Boise State Washington in the afternoons got some intrigue for me as well.
You're not tuned into Ohio State Indiana?
I'll tune in to that'll be the between commercial games for the first quarter, at which point Ohio State will be up 21-7, and I'll be good on that.
Vogues of the Counter Read with us, and at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Thanks for making time this morning, Brandon. Good to talk some ball with you again.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Appreciate you. There he is. Welcome in the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Sharpie, how's your last 2 days been, man? What a whirlwind in Minneapolis.
Yeah. You know what? I used the word yesterday, and you guys have talked already here in a short amount of time about this, and I still feel this way on Saturday morning. Thursday night was so deflating.
Yep.
I mean, I think if you're a doom and gloom person, I got no time for you. That's the first game. I saw enough that I'm in it for the long game with Rule to see, because it's not immediate satisfaction, that there were some things that are different that I saw on Thursday night, but to play that way where you can play so much better and still have an opportunity against a Minnesota team that I think is exactly who you are in 2023, it was just really, really deflating. And that's why the curiosity really starts to peak on how Rule handles Thursday night and what it does a week from today when they play Colorado. So I don't know. It's great to have football back, period. It's one of those, if you've been around here for a while, that was a gut punch that I don't know if there was a point in the fourth quarter where you could solidly say, oh, Nebraska is going to win the game, because we've all been through this. And I wonder if even some of the returning guys were like, all right, can we do it? Can we do it? Can we do it? And it didn't happen.
Gary, do you think that the way that game ended with the collapse at the end, do you think that's forced Husker fans to change the perception of the game, or do you think that should be the perception of the game, if you follow what I'm saying? Because I think there was some improvement in a lot of areas, but at the end of the day, everyone's going to talk about how the game finished, and should that be the top takeaway from the game, that Nebraska found a way to lose again, or do you think the takeaway should be, you know what, Nebraska probably everywhere except wide receiver and quarterback did look better than they did last season?
Yeah, I think that's the balance. That's here's what I said yesterday. Guys, I think you can't judge Thursday night and not include everything we've talked to leading up to that, where the starting point is in this program, where the skill level is, where the development, where the players are, like things that we brought up as concerns, or we brought up and went, man, that's pretty good. Or you listen to what Rule said during camp, outside of Jeff Sims, where they pushed all their chips into the middle, and his arm actually, I'll get to Jeff Sims in a bit. But I think you have to go back and you have to use that as a starting point to look at Thursday night's game. And so there's some good, there's some bad, and some ugly. But I think there's subtle things that they did that look like, okay, here we go. This area could help you. But then compared to others, it was like, oh, gosh. Because, guys, I will tell you right now, and my opinion hasn't changed a couple of days later, Nebraska is in trouble offensively. They got some major issues on offense. Now, the skill at wide receiver, the ability to separate, go over the top, those things have been there. But, man, they got that offensive line. That offensive line doesn't look any different than it did last year. And one particular guy took a major step back in Turner Corcoran.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought up Corcoran, because, and you hate to call it out.
No, you know what? Stop, Mark. We need to fix this, okay? Because he's one of the highest rated recruits that Nebraska football has ever had. Okay? Yeah. And there's been a lot of patience with him. And we think that he's getting closer to being the guy that we expect him to be. He just simply got beat by football 101 the other night. That can't happen when you've played that much football.
And so, and to quantify what you're talking about, there's a unit called Pro Football Focus, if you're not familiar, folks, that grades everybody. And it's a little controversial. Some people are like, it's good. It's not good. But it's wow. And we just had like a weird loud fire alarm thing happening here at the hotel. There is no fire. We are safe. Everything's going to be fine. But so Pro Football Focus grades each individual position and provides a grade. And Turner Corcoran, I thought I had to kind of like rub my eyes, be like, well, hold on a second. Am I reading this right? So he rated literally, and it's like a 1 to 100 grade, which are similar to like, grades back in, grade school and high school, where it's like, if you get a 70 or something, that's okay. You got like a C. Yeah. If you got an 80, wow, pretty good. 90, wow, you played lights out, right? I've never seen this before. He graded a 0, like a 0 in pass protection. Like, so Pro Football Focus evaluated him, basically saying, nobody there would have been as effective as somebody. A 0. That is really hard to do. That is so concerning. Like, is it the end all be all? Did they maybe miss something? Is it possible to get? He literally got a 0 on pass protection. Yeah. Like,
well, there's a play early in the game where the defensive lineman comes across his face and uses a spin move, and it's almost like he'd never seen that before. And that can't, if he's a freshman or a redshirt freshman, I can go, okay, he just hasn't played much football. He's somebody that's played a lot of football, and then it's tied into the Nebraska needs those guys to be good, and they were not good enough on Thursday night. Even my guy who I think is going to have a big year, Ben Scott, didn't have a great game. So it was, you know what it looked like? It looked like two teams playing on Thursday night that was their preseason game. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was bad football in that game. I mean, there was a lot of bad football. And unfortunately for Nebraska, Minnesota found a way in a bad football game to make winning plays at the end. Now, there are some good things. I think the defense gives you hope, and I need to apologize to Ed Foley because I thought the special teams were darn near perfect. But that offensive line and the rest of that offense, I mean, Jeff Sims beat two teams on Thursday night. He beat Minnesota with his legs. He beat Nebraska with his arm.
Jeez. One quick point I want to make on Corcoran here, because I do want to come back to the defense of Corcoran. He does need to be better, being the highest rated recruit in Nebraska, not history, but recent memory at least. And I look at it and I go, that is a guy that has been, he's played left tackle, he's played left guard, he's played right tackle, he's played right guard. He's been moved all over the place. No coaching staff has ever quite found where Corcoran belongs. And you feel for a guy like that that's just been shuffled around throughout his entire Husker career. But at the same time, as you said, he wasn't getting beat schematically. That's one thing. Whenever you're making mental errors, that's one thing that's correctable. He was getting beat just physically, as you laid out with the spin move, with the power move. It was just a guy that did not look physically prepared to be playing on the Big Ten on the lines of scrimmage. And I think that's what was most concerning about Corcoran. And you hope that Prohaska is able to get back from the injury and keep some semblance of health, because I don't think it can get worse than what we saw from Corcoran at the left tackle spot. Elsewhere on the offensive line, I think there was progress running the football. Pass protection wasn't perfect by any means, and maybe that's why Nebraska decided to go with the running quarterback, because, hey, we're going to need to have a running quarterback based on how we feel our offensive line's pass protection is going to be. It wasn't perfect, looked marginally better, but I do think the run blocking looked better from the offensive line as a whole.
Well, yes, and see here, they'd love to run between the tackles. And I know Marcus Satterfield, and I have questions about him before even Thursday night. They were really creative in the run game, especially when they had to rely so much on Sims. Now, Jeff Sims a month from now ain't going to last if he's running the ball 19 times a game, because he got bumped. He got bumped some couple of key times. But what they were able to do in the run game, like maybe it was just the quarterback centric. I mean, they ran the triple option. They ran quarterback power. They ran quarterback follow. They ran some unique things they designed in the run game, but they don't want to do that. They want to run between the tackles. Guys, all you had to know is they had Gabe Ervin as a lead back for the quarterback. That's not a good sign if you're the 5 up front. I mean, what does that say to you if you just can't run the football with your running backs? So they've got to fix that between now and really the rest of the season, because they cannot have Jeff Sims. There was too much Jeff Sims. That's what I'm trying to say. But in that game, it hit you in the face of, okay, we are a little bit discombobulated on offense, and he's the only thing we really have going consistently. So run, Jeff, run. And, for a while it worked. But it's go ahead, Smitty.
No, I was going to say, they, I think, made a determination in the life of that game saying, this is how it's got to happen for Nebraska to have a chance to win. So they just rode Sims. And when it comes to play calling and decision making, Gary, you can't be afraid to throw the football because you got to have some balance. But in the same sense, do you think Sat was shocked? I know Nebraska fans were like, especially after that second interception. But there was fear on that final drive with the prospect of having to make a throw to complete a pass to get into field goal range, and it ended up biting Nebraska with another pick.
Well, so he is the guy that they pushed all their chips into the middle of the table.
Right.
We've all said, God, 3 years at Georgia Tech. Everybody who talked to Georgia Tech, he's going to be a dude who'll be able to run the ball. He's going to punish some people, but his decision-making is out the window. And the coaching staff, led by the head coach, said, no, he's different. Even his teammates said, you know what, he's throwing the ball better in camp. I was just, and I probably shouldn't if you think about his time at Georgia Tech. Guys, that looked like in the passing game a first-time quarterback from the decision-making. Yeah. Okay, I think there's some arm strength there. But just the pure decision making and the 101 of being a quarterback, I had no idea that was going to be an issue, because that last play. So they come out of that timeout. I think Jeff Sims was staring at Marcus Washington in the timeout, and then they walked back to the huddle, and he kept staring at Marcus Washington, and then they went to the line of scrimmage, and he was staring at Marcus Washington, and then the ball was snapped, and he was staring at Marcus Washington, and everybody in the ballpark knew that he was going to throw the ball to Marcus Washington. How does that happen? The guy is in his 4th year. That's a major between-the-ears mistake, football 101, and everybody read it, and you threw right into it. Now, moving forward, he's going to still have to throw the ball with wide receivers that are having trouble getting open, getting off of the initial line of scrimmage. They cannot, and this is for Jeff Sims' benefit, that they kept going back to guys. You remember, you can't ask him to throw over the top of the linebacker to an underneath a safety. He can't complete that pass. And the passes that he was able to complete, it was a little bit of quick game, okay? And if that has to be the way Nebraska operates in the passing game, I'm okay with it. Is quick game, get it out, get some blockers downfield, and try and pick up 7 to 10 to 12 yards.
Gary, this quarterback race felt like it was done during spring football, with Casey not making it in the spring and then eventually being, I'm not sure if you want to call it run out of town, but Matt Rule, from our conversation with Charles Thompson, made it clear that, hey, if I were you, I'd transfer. I think you can read in between the lines there if you're a quarterback, what that means for you. Revisionist history, looking back on that, do you doubt that decision now that you've seen Jeff Sims in one game, or is that too small a sample size for you?
Well, okay, so two things. I'm sorry to bring this up. Two things got me triggered after this game. One, curse talk, okay? And then the other about, well, if Casey Thompson was playing, Nebraska would have won. Okay, was Trey Palmer playing?
No.
Okay. Did you need for the quarterback to run?
Yes.
Okay. That's they and you know what? And I like Casey. And I kind of get what they did when they got here. They wanted their guy. But that's the first test of Rule with the fan base is they went all in on Jeff Sims. Like Jeff Sims, he's not being benched unless he gets hurt. They went all in, and his first game, all of us went, oh boy, that guy looks not anything different. That's a problem you have to fix. But is it Jeff Sims, guys, moving forward, what do you believe? Is it Jeff Sims fixing himself, Or is it Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield and the rest? Because Sims is the kind of quarterback that needs the running backs and the offensive line and the wide. He needs all the other pieces instead of winging a game on his own. Is this become a case of we've seen one game, we know what we have, we've got to design and operate to help the quarterback instead of the quarterback helping us?
You nailed it.
This.
It's 100% it, Gary, because it's really clear. You have a couple things with Sims where you're right about him locking on a receiver, which is an easy thing to say, I think. And I think some people say that even when it's not true, but in this case, it is 100% true. Like, and if you go back and you look at his Georgia Tech film, same deal. I mean, that's just who he is, right? Like he locks on a guy. He's pretty accurate. It's not like he's totally inaccurate. He's got a strong arm, but he absolutely locks on a guy. So how do you hedge against that? Especially with a unit that, has a tackle that registers a 0 when it comes to pass protection. Like, that's not going to be your thing. Just admit it, right? Rule in the postgame was saying, we got to let Sims spin it. No, you don't. No, you don't, dude. You do not have to let him spin it. You don't. So what you need to do, and of course we had this all figured out. It's very easy. But truly, your best shot is to show restraint, keep it on the ground. The only time Sims throws is play action or on a run pass. You just don't do those things.
About the last 10 seconds of your question froze. I think the Wi-Fi at the old Hilton went down for just a second.
Yeah, damn it. Oh, what do you do? Well, it was basically saying what Sims needs. It needs to be show restraint offensively, keep it on the ground even when your play sheet says that you should, open it up, and really limit Sims passing situations to hard play actions. In that way, be a Jamal Lord, right? Like that's the stuff that worked for Lord was hard play actions, tight end deep. That's the extent of your passing game.
Yes, but the passing game is kind of interesting because you guys talked about with Brandon the usage of the tight end. I mean, one of them could have had a tight end in Borkature wide open. That goes back to the Sims just field awareness. I don't know what happened with the tight ends. Fedoni took 39 snaps. He had 0 targets. Yeah. All 4 of us there, we could have never imagined that. The problem with wide receiver is they don't have anybody to blow off the top.
Well, they do, but he's not ready yet. Malachi can. Malachi did on 1 snap. He came in and he did get loose downfield, but
and that's true, and that you bring him along. But if I'm in that wide receiver room, they had to bring Tommy Hill over from the defense to try and blow the top off. Okay, that's not good. But they also have a problem. This isn't new, guys. And I cachet this with Marcus Washington didn't play in the first half. But when Marcus Washington was out there, Sims was a lot more comfortable in the passing game. They have trouble with guys getting off the line of scrimmage. Minnesota was winning a lot of battles at the line of scrimmage. So those wide receivers were not getting separation, even to get downfield just a little bit. I mean, look at Nebraska's lone touchdown was basically a bust, where it turned into a wild and wacky play. So they've got to do something in the short passing game to basically help themselves, and then Marcus Washington is going to be your guy moving forward until you get those freshman wide receivers up to speed. Who are those guys that can run go routes? And you say, Sims, just throw it up. And look at that. Malachi is down there. So they've got some things to figure out in the whole passing game because they've got some limitations that I don't think are going to disappear anytime soon. And I think Ramir is a weapon. I think Ramir he's kind of a utility guy that is going to need to have more touches in the passing game. It was a discombobulated offensive night. And I think things went wrong for Nebraska on offense. And then Satterfield and Rule didn't know how to adjust. And then also, I thought Nebraska had trouble with the clock rules. I thought there was a lot of confusion a lot of times on the sideline during the offensive possessions on who's in the game, how much time is on the clock, what are we doing here? And thus, you had penalties by guys who are in the program for a while that are the most consistent guy in camp like Piper. And it was a mess offensively. And thank God the defense gave you hope, and it did. To me, it gave me hope. I think Nebraska, if there's a major takeaway from Thursday night, is Nebraska has a competent defensive coordinator. Tony White knows what the hell he's doing.
Yeah. They're competent, Sharpie, in defense after one game reaction. They're competent after one game with special teams. It's really what can that offense become, and how complementary can they be? Is it going to be one of these seasons where you got to hold a team to 13 or 10, and you got to be able to score 13 or 14 or 17, which that sounds pretty Big Ten anyway. But you're just hoping with the athleticism that you have can match maybe more of a high-powered expectation, and there's a long way to go with that. Sharpie, I want to get your take on what next Saturday means. It is Deion Sanders Day, is Prime and Company 2 hours away from kickoff in Fort Worth. It's important. It's nostalgia. It's fun. It's Nebraska, Colorado next Saturday, as we'll all be out in Boulder. That being said, it gets pretty do or die for the Nebraska outlook. Do you agree with that take for 2023 if they don't get out of Boulder, at least with a win, and start the year 1-1?
Yeah, I mean, 0-2. I mean that would be a little uncomfortable. But I think here's now what happens for next Saturday in Boulder is, what have you done in the meantime in the teaching moment? See, here's why I'm deflated. I'm disappointed. Everybody should be pissed off, because that was an opportunity to win a football game on the road, and Nebraska wasn't able to close it out, and they weren't able to do things in the fourth quarter that Rule had preached. But I saw a guy at the end of the game, guys, and tell me if I'm wrong, a guy that loses a one-score game that I think sitting there didn't have the deer in the headlights look, and he had it figured out right away of what ailed them. So this becomes a Matt Rule week where he's got a teaching moment, because he's now dipped his toe for the first time in this one-score loss, this close loss, these deflating losses. And he's got guys in that room that are like, oh, boy, here we go again. But Coach has been preaching. So this is a big week for Matt Rule. Teaching moment to get them ready to go. But I think you'll see, I think they'll also figure out who is the best players to have on the field. Defensively, they're still going to play a lot of people. But I think offensively, they will whittle down the amount of guys that they have out there playing. And I think you'll see a different approach when they go to Boulder. I think they're gonna for a while here, they're gonna have to rely on that defense to give them enough to keep them in the game. They're nowhere near the 09 defense, but I think this defense by the end of the year will at least be 5-6-ish in the Big Ten, maybe a little bit better, because you can tell they've repped well. They've done very good film study. They tackled better for a first game Nebraska team that I recall in a while. There's a lot of things on defense and special teams that I think, while your offense tries to find their shoes, I think gives you hope. But they're going to have to play a pretty spotless game out in Boulder, regardless of what CU looks like, because you don't want to go 2 games where you're really, really clunky, especially after everything you've talked about during camp. So that game has a ton of intrigue. And I think for the psyche, that game you have to get on the plane in Boulder with a check mark in the left column of the win.
Gary, if that offense still does look clunky, and you laid out the fact that Matt Rule immediately following the game knew what ailed the offense, I think most of the state did with the 3 turnovers. And I'm not making fun of you by any means. I think that it's deeper than just turnovers. I think there's some element of needing to put Sims in positions where he can be his most successful. But if the offense is still clunky against Colorado, do you worry about Nebraska being the 2023 version of what Iowa was last year, and that your defense is going to have to keep you in every game that you play, and your defense is going to have to make some plays if you are going to go win?
Yeah, we're making fun of Iowa City in the drive for 325. Is there going to be a drive for 325 in Nebraska? But let me ask you 3, because I trust your opinion as football guys. Because in my head, I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, how was Rule so off on Jeff Sims? Well, I watched that game because he doubled down on Jeff Sims numerous times, and it's the decision making that really gets to me. That I can't believe some of the post snap judgments that he was making. But you 3 are really good football people. Your audience trusts your opinion. Am I overthinking this? That between Thursday night and Saturday in Boulder, why not roll Jeff Sims out of the pocket, cut down half the field for him?
Dude,
Yeah, move him, dude. Get his legs.
And play action. Move him and play action.
Yeah.
And that's
I just
it.
run past
Nothing
option
else.
him to death. Give me a
Nothing
tight
else.
end. Give me Ramir somewhere I can dump it off for 5. Give me a tight end that can get open over the middle.
And Schmidt froze up here, and we'll see if he comes back or not. As
There's about 5.
Maybe.
All right. Pick your favorite 4 and go.
Yeah.
Probably
It really is.
Sorry, but that's my thought. Find guys and let him move and use his legs. And guess what? His athleticism can and will take over. He's shifty. He's powerful. He's fast. And he can tuck and go and pick up 12.
It's the same thing that I think staffs here have struggled with for a long time. And it's being what you are versus what you want to be. And I think of all the offensive coordinators that have come through here, Tim Beck was probably actually the best at, and everybody hated him at the time too. Everybody hates the offensive coordinators no matter what. But in hindsight, he wasn't trying to be something they weren't. He was just like, this is what we are, right? We got some decent receiving talent. We got a quarterback that makes some questionable decisions. So they kept the game simple for him. They didn't have him stand back and try to carve up a secondary with multiple reads. If that's not what you are, don't do it. And by the way, if you're going to do that with Sims, if you're going to run him and people are worried about, what if he gets hurt? Well, look who's backing him up. It ain't Joe Montana. It's Heinrich Harburg. It's Chubba Purdy. And guess what? Those dudes are also basically better runners than they are throwers, right? Like, that's what you are. Just admit it. Go with it. Yeah. Embrace it. Be different. You've tried for a couple decades now to be this like NFL factory or whatever. You've put exactly 0 quarterbacks in the NFL. You've put like 4 receivers there in 20 years. Like, quit optimizing. Well, this is what the pros, the kids, the recruits won't come here because they want to play in an NFL. You ain't putting them in the NFL. They don't come. There's nobody out there that's like, God, finally Nebraska's doing that pro style where that's my direct path to the league. No, you ain't going there. You might make it despite what Nebraska's doing. Like, you need, And let's also look at the Big Ten. That for some reason the Big Ten doesn't necessarily embrace the running quarterback, much like Nebraska has in its illustrious history. It allows you to be different too. You can be different. You could admit that you're not going to pump a bunch of dudes into the NFL, and you can maybe, win some effing games. Right? Like, I don't know.
Mark, with all that in mind, though,
it doesn't seem that hard. It doesn't seem that hard to me. I just think they're making it harder than it has to.
Mark, with all that in mind, what's your take on Jeff Sims having 19 attempts? I know a couple sacks in there inflate that number a little bit, but 19 rushing attempts for Jeff Sims. What's your reaction to that? Is that too much?
It's a little high. I think you knock about 5 off.
Little high.
It's a little high. But I don't think it's terribly high.
I mean,
McCaffrey thinks it's a little high.
He's 6'4", 230. Like, he can take he's not some, delicate flower that we're talking about.
Elijah, it's just you and I.
For now. They're going to come back here in about
5, don't we? We got the frozen thing going on. We're back. Sorry. So take about 5 runs off of his tally, right? And add about 5 to the tailback tally, right? Give Sims 12 to 15 runs a game. Make sure the tailbacks get a lot more than they did in the last game.
Who is that running back? That's another question from Thursday night. Who is Nebraska's number 1 running back?
Grant, but he needs to go Tiki Barber in his ball carrying style, right? Like, he needs to be like the program. He needs to be walking around campus holding that damn ball, right? He needs to he needs to cover it up more or something. But between he and Irvin and Ramir, you got enough there. And even if you're only getting 3-4 yards, that's okay. Milk some clock, punt it deep, play field position, be what you are.
I thought Matt Rule did not do Anthony Grant a favor for Thursday night. First of all, Anthony Grant is still that guy that wants to bump it to the outside, which is one of the reasons why they've been upset at him. But if you go back, man, and I thought Wally of Minnesota made a really nice play. Okay. But you know why he was going for that kind of play? Because the head coach said 2 weeks ago that the reason that Anthony Grant wasn't the number one running back is he can't hold on to the football.
Yeah.
So what do you do if you're Minnesota? You're like, hey, when 23's in the game, he's fumble prone.
Yeah.
You can strip him. You can punch it. I mean, I don't know, guys. There's just a lot of things on offense, from the Omar Brown interception to what do you do? I have no problem on the first play taking a home run shot, but then what are you doing on second down? Because then on third down, you're like, oh gosh, we're in trouble here. And you gave the football right back. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can fill up a whole sheet of manila paper. But there was some stuff that I liked that I was encouraged by. But then there were some things that, in terms of game management, like that scenario, that I just that's the first game of the season. That's what it looked like.
You know what? You're talking about that opening series of the fourth quarter where they're 3 and out, where it's 3 straight pass plays. Instead of putting Hill in to go deep, run that RPO for me, where you're running the slant to Kemp on the first down play call. Look at me being armchair a-hole. Sorry, but because that RPO was open that got tipped, that was going to be a giant gain, but you're having to run it on 2nd and 10 versus 1st and 10. I just, based on what they've seen through practice, through trying to get ready for this first game, do you think they had a good grasp on what they thought they could do? I know what they called. I know they put time and effort and work into try and planning something offensively from a coaching staff perspective through fall camp and even through game 1. Good luck finding out what you're good at and then trying to build around that so you can go get some scores in Boulder next week, because they may not know. If the guy shows you one thing in practice, but here comes the decision-making in the game time, you know, if you're Satterfield, you probably weren't expecting that. If you're Matt Rule, you were hoping for better decision-making, because it goes without saying that you hope the guy doesn't put the ball in danger. So you got to be the same guy in practice, and hopefully it carries over to the game Saturday.
Guys, I think what kind of started the rockiness of the offensive, everything fitting together, I think the offensive line not being in sync and dominant really threw them off.
Good.
I think quietly they knew that Jeff Sims' decision making could teeter on jumping off the plank. But I think they put the game plan together where they thought the offensive line would hold its own and they'd be able to do some things that when it all of a sudden had some leaks in it, I think then they went into a little bit of because then that's when it became the Jeff Sims legs show. So I think that caught them off guard, that they did not kind of game plan for. I think they game planned for, we think our 5 up front are going to be at least good enough that we'll be able to run with the running backs and we'll be okay to churn the clock and do that kind of stuff. And I think they found out right away that was not the case.
Yeah, listen, and that might also just be, hey, your introduction back into the Big Ten. Like, the Minnesota has been tough sledding for Nebraska almost the whole time Nebraska's been in the league. Like, they have competent defensive linemen. They have really good players in the secondary. They're not an easy team. The only time Nebraska's done anything against them offensively of note was really 2018 when Frost got his first win, and you schemed a couple huge runs for you schemed a couple huge runs for a Zigbo where he was wide open. But that was kind of it too, right? And you had a couple long Martinez runs, but they're tough to go against, right? And I think that's part of it also is, and you know, maybe they thought their offensive line would be more dominant, but that's kind of the Big Ten, and that's kind of Minnesota in particular. Like, it's tough sledding, and so you have to be hard-headed and stick with it, even if you're not getting the results you want. You got to keep making hay so that it opens up in the fourth.
Adding to your point, Mark, we debated all offseason of, man, it's great to play Minnesota in the first game. It's actually for Nebraska, Minnesota is probably the worst opponent to play in the first game. And again, I think these two teams are very similar. I think that is a quick lane bowl team that Nebraska lost to Thursday night. That's a 7-win team. They've got some issues. If Nebraska wins a game like that, if Nebraska plays the role of Minnesota and wins at the last second, Nebraska's still in jail in Hennepin County because they would have stolen that victory. Minnesota got the victory and they got out of Dodge. Okay, they said, thank you for coming. We got a victory. Whew, we're 1-0. But I think, adding to your point, Mark, Minnesota, without a preseason game in college, playing game one is a tough team to play because they hit the snot out of you. I mean, they hit you and they thump you. They're not as talented as they've been the last couple of years and not like the 19 team. But, boy, there is one thing that is constant across P.J. Fleck in his 7 years is they will thump you. They will hit you. And I don't think in their first game there were certain guys that were ready for that physicality right out of the gate. They're going to be ready for that because that's what this program is building to, but not night one when you haven't had a preseason game and that's the first opponent you play that doesn't look like you and they smack you in the mouth right away and you go, whoa, what's going on?
Hey, and give Nebraska some credit, though, too, because they did also. Nebraska was hitting. That was evident. And
there's dudes on the defense that are hit stickers.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. Like it was a pretty even match, right? Like pretty even matchup. But I thought too, even Minnesota offensively, they had to execute. They had to make incredible plays to get through, right? I mean, the catch in the end zone was a fantastic play, right? Even defensively, when Grant fumbled, that was an excellent punch on the ball, textbook. Like they couldn't just sort of line up and beat Nebraska. They couldn't. They had to have playmakers make exceptional plays in order to eke out a victory. So Nebraska can at least take some solace in that. And by the way, Gray Woman in the stream had written something pretty damn funny. It's up a ways. She wrote, "Know when it's time to get out of Minnesota. The game was 2 days ago. Unless you're hostages, it's time." An important point, Gray Woman. If you haven't been
Gray
listening.
Woman, we're seeing Pearl Jam tonight. Then
Pearl Jam is tonight.
Yeah,
we make a run for the border.
Yeah, and then we're leaving. Okay, fair point.
Then we'll be in Boulder.
Fair point.
You're going straight from Minneapolis to Boulder. You guys got a great life.
Well, and you know what we could do, by the way? You know what we could do is go Washington and North Dakota State today at U.S. Banks. Oh, jeez. Yeah. Okay, now we're back. Eastern Washington and North Dakota State are playing at U.S. Bank Stadium today, too. It's possible if we want to go watch that. And, watch North Dakota State, which plays exactly like what we want Nebraska to play like.
Hey, Schmidt, when you said that, he looked so excited to go see another football game this weekend.
He was talking about it yesterday off the air. I heard him. He's like, "You think anyone wants to go to this one with me? Like North Dakota State, Eastern Washington?"
No one does. We're just going to watch.
You go ahead. I'm going to watch Dion, man.
Hey, speaking of, you brought up North Dakota State. That's another thing. Like, this is where the balance of deflating is. Man, I saw what the end goal is supposed to look like, but yet the real result looks too familiar. Is that game actually was so Matt Rule. It was very methodical. It was, hey, here we come. This is what we're going to do. There were like elements that I was like, okay, that's what it's supposed to look like under Matt Rule, but not to get the result that you wanted. It just is. That's the deflating part of opening night when you had it in your grasp, a golden opportunity. And just once again, the wild stat that is out there and a good friend of mine and I know interacts with you guys' show, Stu Manji on Twitter, Eric, who has all kinds of stats. He tweeted out a stat on Thursday night, well after the game was over. Rule is the third straight first-year head coach to lose his first game by one score, and two of them have been on the last play.
Yep.
Oh, geez, that's right.
Mike Riley
with
and
BYU. Yeah, Riley with BYU, and then yeah. Wow. Go ahead. We're getting really good at it. Nebraska, I mean, if nothing else, we all know how to deal. at this point. We all know how to cope. And so that's
Sure.
I mean,
sure we do.
guys. I would have never thought that you're up 10-3 with about 5 minutes to go, and that by the time the game ends, Minnesota would have scored 10 points.
I know
That was
That's
Sooner
not easy to do.
Magic-esque, right? I mean, it's Keith Jackson down the sideline for them to score that many points, 10 points in 3 minutes with that offense against a defense that had been playing really well for Nebraska.
Yeah, I really wanted to see Tristan Alvano because I thought when Nebraska got into Minnesota territory, I thought they're gonna squeeze the clock and they're gonna set it up, and Alvano will step in and he'll punch in a field goal from 50 yards or so.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was practicing it, and the assistant coaches were clearing out room for him. They're like, "Hey, stay away from Tristan."
But
prepares
give credit to Minnesota. They made winning plays, and the Greek missile did on 3rd and 4th down. Because remember, I also thought they're done when they got the 3rd down penalty that moved them back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this might happen. But, I mean, Hartzog won't want to see that on tape anymore. And Jackson made a great catch and even better slide in the foot. It's just Nebraska didn't make winning plays. They didn't make winning plays throughout the course of 60 minutes that they wouldn't have had to worry about the end. And that's a lesson that this coaching staff is going to have to learn with the guys that are here of how you put that all together. But, good, bad, the ugly, it's game one. But you can't let Thursday night beat you next Saturday in Boulder.
Amen.
If you do, then we're going to have a heated discussion around the state on talk shows on Monday morning.
Gary, that seems to me to be a fitting place to end the Husker talk. Anyone else have anything else they want to add? Because I want to get Gary's thought on high school football last night. Millard West upsets Omaha North. The parity in Class A seems to be just at an all-time high right now. I want to get Gary's thoughts on what we saw in the Friday night action last night.
Yeah, that was an impressive win by Petey. They went over to North and beat them on a last-second field goal. I will tell you, Millard South shutting out Elkhorn South 33-0 also caught me off guard. And Carson Ronner, the quarterback for Elkhorn South, who is just a tank, got injured. But I can't recall a Guy Rosenberg team being shut out. Millard South, Ty Wisdom, he's in his second year, took over when Andy Means retired, came from Arizona, came back to Nebraska from Arizona. They got some good things going at Millard South. But at the end of the day, and we get it Friday night, Omaha West Side and Bell West, I don't know who's touching West Side. They're not going to get complacent. They are loaded, and they every week they try and get better. That'll be a great game Friday night. But you're right. There's at least, I think there's West Side, and then there's a middle of the pack where there is some parity in Class A. Yeah.
Well, if we were to do a journal entry on this Husker situation, right? If we were to do a journal entry at this point, I think it would probably be just to put a bow on this game. It feels like the program is in better hands. There are a lot of things to like. Yeah. You see some good physicality, but man, you got to figure out your offensive identity, and that's going to take some time. Yep. That'll probably take, they just saw for the first time what they actually have in a game situation in the Big Ten, and it's going to take them a little bit. They need to figure out who they are identity-wise, but that's kind of it, right? Everything else seems competent or okay.
So you can put your pen down. Who are we? Question mark. ... Like
if you're like really, it's it. You just got to figure out your offensive identity, right? And admit who the hell you are. Just admit
what can you do?
Next Saturday, having a full game of Marcus Washington will greatly help. Yeah.
Yep.
Sharpie, enjoy your football weekend, man. Thanks for jumping on with us. Good to get caught up. Hey, you want me to talk to Eddie? What do you want to hear for the encore tonight?
I saw Pearl Jam at Wrigley Field a few years ago. You guys are in for a great treat. They just play, man. I mean, they've got such a huge catalog. They just play, and they are great in person. So have fun. Great job, guys. I've really enjoyed all your coverage here around Minnesota. I love the Twin Cities. I went to my first semester in college was at the U of M. It was just too big for me, or I would have stayed there. So it's always, and then working for the Twins, it's always been a place I love. So great job on the coverage with all three of you.
It's great town. If you have any recs on sports bar football watching today, as we matriculate towards St. Paul, we would love to hear them.
We need a Gary recommendation.
So you're going to the XL, right, to watch?
Where the Wild play. Yeah.
Okay. Have you been to Red Cow yet?
I went with Searles a couple of years ago. Someone to name drop like a loser. Sorry.
Take Kraynak to Red Cow.
Sharpie, I can't eat
for a fantastic burger.
I can't eat any more meat. I had an 18-ounce.
We had Murray's last night steakhouse. Have you heard of Murray's Steakhouse downtown?
Yeah.
Dude,
Yes.
I'm still miserable. I want to go die somewhere.
Because you guys were at Lions Pub right next door.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
Husker Bar in downtown. Yeah. So Murray's is fantastic. It can be a little pricey, but it is well worth it. They take care of you. But those steaks, you immediately go into a coma. They actually have a room where you get to take a nap before you leave.
They should. No,
where was that?
And then when you cut through the steak and it just slices perfectly. Oh,
we got the butter knife steak for $2. There's a butter knife steak.
And that's
what they call it.
Yeah, that is their signature item.
Yeah, it was.
Look
fantastic.
at you guys.
I know, living it up, man. Living it up.
Hey, Lions Pub, they do it right. As you were there yesterday, Schmitty. That's pretty cool. Did you see some of the pictures of former professional wrestlers?
Yes, I posted. I posted the Baron on Twitter last night.
Yeah, so he's from Omaha. Yeah.
Yes, and he's doing the claw, and I sent the picture because it was an autograph picture to Babbers. Mike Babcock's the pro wrestling aficionado. He loves pro wrestling, so I had to send him a picture of the claw last night.
Jeez.
It's in the back room. Yeah, as you go into the back, you've got the Baron, you've got Rozier. I think you have Terrell Newby, and then there's another couple of pictures of Nebraska players. Oh, Foltzy. They got a tribute to Sam Foltz, which is really cool.
It was really interesting talking to the owner too about, they're making the decision as to whether or not to make it a Husker watch site. And as they kind of thought through, because a lot of different programs wanted them to, and he had to turn them all down. It was just funny listening to why he would turn down a few of the fan bases. It's just it's perfect.
Oh, this was great. He's like, Nebraska fans love to get it going. They'll drink a lot of beer, and they're always, even if they lose, they're good people. And then he was talking about, maybe another program that wears red that, man, they come in here, they want to break stuff.
He's like, they're just wild, right?
Yeah.
And then a program that wears black and gold, they're like,
no, they're just old.
It's kind of old and don't really, commit to it. Oh, it was great. So Nebraska, they decided as soon as Nebraska went in the Big Ten, they're like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, we'll accommodate Nebraska here, and
based on
Husker
all the
fans
people.
filled it up. And I will just stump for this too. I haven't been to a lot of Big Ten venues. This is the first. I think it's the first one I've been to. Now that I'm thinking about it, wow, that's weird to say out loud. No, been to Ann Arbor also. Sorry, but as far as Husker road trips are concerned, dude, Minneapolis is great. It's a great city. Yeah. The campus is awesome. You got light rail that you can take. You don't even need to deal with cars and all that. You don't have to rent a car. Don't have to do Uber. And then the campus itself, in the stadium, their stadium is more sturdy and significant than their program is. It's a nice, big, good, legitimate facility, right? And you're just sort of man, it just feels like Minnesota could be so much bigger if boosters or anybody cared, right?
Sharpie,
I know they care. It's just you got to remember that they know their place in a professional sports market where they are Vikings, Twins, Gophers, and there's sometimes more attention to the arena across the street from the football stadium, Mariucci, for the hockey program than there is for the football team.
Sure. Yeah. Last thought here on just the Minnesota experience with our friend Ray next door. Just kind of hearing his take on the Christian Leitner era here. The nickname of Tequila Tommy for a former Viking quarterback. I mean, just some of the E-True Hollywood story behind the scenes. The Tommy Kramer era. Yeah, Tequila Tommy.
Yeah, when they had it going, man, they had some characters. There's a lot of stories like a Scott Studwell, back in the day of
John
Vikings,
Randall.
Even Yeah. Hey, you know what? I mean, the Vikings are huge. I went to a couple. I've never seen them at US Bank Stadium, but I saw them at the Metrodome, and it was a good time.
Yeah. Good city. Hey, good road trip too, because direct flights. You know, if you want to do a flight, it's just
Allegedly.
I like it. I'll be back. I think this is going to be kind of a regular. You know, whenever Nebraska's up here, it's easy, it's close, and there's a lot more to do. You know.
Hey, can we honestly say that next year will be the first time Nebraska football in a while has a normal home opener or normal opener? It's not going to Dublin. It's not a conference game to start. It's not week 0. As of right now, it's UTEP to start next year.
Well, but now Oregon and Washington got added to the mix, so God only knows what they're going to do.
I know. Next thing you know, knowing Nebraska's luck, Nebraska will end up opening with USC next year.
No.
In Vegas.
Listen. What it's going to be
on a Tuesday?
Nebraska on the road, UCLA. I'm calling my shot right now. That's how Nebraska opens the season, on the road against UCLA. Big noon kickoff, and then USC is going to go, and they're going to play at Penn State, a night game to open the season. I'm calling my shot.
Ooh.
What is this? 4 straight years Nebraska's begun the Big Ten on the road? Is that right?
Yep, it's no fun.
The Big Ten is going to want one of those 4 teams to have a home game in the first week of the season. They're going to want it to be a helmet game, and they're not going to send the likes of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, some of your college football playoff hopefuls on the road to go play out there. So who are they going to send? It's going to be Nebraska. I'm calling my shot right now.
All right.
I like it. I don't want to go to LA though. I'd rather go to Eugene or Seattle. LA is ridiculous. You know, I don't know. If you all had to pick, where would you go? Do you want to go deal with LA?
Let's go to Oregon. Let's go to Oregon.
Oregon's pretty good. I'd go Seattle. Let's go Seattle. Where would you go, Gary?
You know, Eugene and Seattle were great trips. I don't know. We haven't been to the Rose Bowl in a while, and the Rose Bowl looks different from the last time Nebraska played there.
I just don't want to deal with the traffic in LA, though. The traffic is just.
It's the Rose Bowl.
Like 2 hours to get anywhere.
I think all 4 trips are pretty good because I mean, we need to wash the bad taste of the what is that? Is it the 06 game? Yeah, the 06 game against USC at the Coliseum.
Yeah, that was within striking distance, and they just kind of burnt
I think Nebraska moving forward, they'll make 2 trips to the West Coast. So every year you're probably going to Los Angeles, and you're just going to swap USC or UCLA, and then I think every year you're going to Eugene or Seattle.
Mm-hmm. I could deal. Pacific Northwest is the best. And that's like the best part of the whole country. I mean, outside of the ridiculous, there's some social issues happening up there. But in terms of actual scenery and stuff to do, awesome.
Don't get Mark talking about this smack in Seattle ever again.
Oh, man. That led to some great fans.
Hey, did you go to the game in Eugene?
Yeah.
Okay. So you and the granolas were everywhere in that town.
That town is a trip. So, it's kind of like imagine Dundee.
That town is on a trip.
I know. Well, yeah, exactly. Imagine Dundee, like the Dundee area in Omaha, but every other house might be a weed shop, or it might be a bar. Like people just turn their houses into weed shops and bars. You're just walking down the street, house, weed shop, but it's a house. Place is weird. And then you go to oh dude, we tailgated. There's a brewery there called Ninkasi, which is really good beer, by the way. Ninkasi Brewing. They retrofitted a garbage truck, and that's like their tailgating thing. It's got taps coming out of it. There's a deck on top, like that's a thing, and they do that all. Yeah, it's and the facility there, by the way, looks like the Death Star. That thing is crazy, which doesn't fit the rest of the hippie vibe. It's a great place to go. Great place to go.
They don't have the stuff in the Big 12.
No, they don't.
No, you can't even get liquor at grocery stores in the half places in the Big 12. Yeah, it's true.
That seems like
on that note, we'll say good luck and God bless Coach Prime, and let's see if Nebraska, Colorado can live up to the nostalgia.
And that's what I want to get Gary's take on. Aside from Colorado, TCU, what games you watch, and do you have any margaritas on tap in honor of Jimmy Buffett today?
One
it's Jimmy
margarita.
Buffett Day. Oh.
Well,
did you hear the news?
do we need to tell him?
Did you not hear the news, Mark? Jimmy Buffett passed away last night.
I did not hear.
So sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
That sucks.
Damn it. And Bob Barker just died too.
Yeah, they're having a hell of a party upstairs today.
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Bob Barker is already there, and he's enjoying life. And he said to Jimmy Buffett, "Come on down."
Is that what happened?
I don't have any sources. But I'm just imagining that's what happened.
Hey, Gary, if you get any sources on the activities of heaven, you let me know. That's a moneymaker right there.
Hey, I know you guys are talking Colorado TCU. I'm very disappointed in Elijah because Elijah's on top of this. How come you haven't talked about the great CBS 11 a.m. game tomorrow?
Who's that?
Rutgers Northwestern.
Oh, yeah.
My dear God. CBS is going to
all of us sickos, let's get together.
All right. Well, by the first round, Sharpie.
Hey, Rutgers, and then you had Nebraska-Minnesota, Indiana, Ohio State, Rutgers, Northwestern. Welcome to the new Big Ten, where there are a lot of conference games, or 2 or 3 on opening weekend. That's what's going to be. That's what's going to be like moving forward. So back to Elijah's original theory, maybe that's what 24 looks like. But man, Nebraska needs a normal opener for once.
Yeah, make it on a Saturday. Make it week 1. Make it at home. How's that sound? Is that too much to ask for?
Whoa, that's crazy.
All three.
Yeah.
Sharpie, enjoy your weekend. We appreciate you greatly, man.
Thanks, guys. Safe travels back home. We'll talk to you next week in Boulder.
All right. That sounds
Thanks,
good.
Gary.
Gary Sharp with us, the Iron Horse. Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We are going to say adios and get geared up for a day of college football. Talk to you on Monday. We are doing a Monday show with Hail Varsity 4 to 6 as gear up for Nebraska-Colorado week. Thanks again.